The colony ship Verdant Hope touched down on Kareth 7 like a wounded bird, groaning, hissing steam, and shedding hull panels across 3 kilometers of cracked ochre desert. Commander Kale of the Vreth Collective stood at the viewport and watched the landing with all 4 of his eyes narrowed to slits. Deathworlders, muttered his second officer, Ven, clicking her mandibles in distaste. The council sent us Deathworlders. Kale did not answer immediately. He had read the briefing. Earth. 3rd planet from a volatile yellow star. 1G gravity, twice what most civilized species found comfortable. Extreme temperature variance. Predatory megafauna on every continent. Tectonic instability. Pathogen diversity that had killed 3 Vreth survey teams. And the humans, somehow, had not only survived on that chaos world, they had thrived. They had built cities, symphonies, and starships before they'd even learned to map their own ocean floor. He had requested engineers. The council had sent him Maya Ortega. 1 human. Female. Approximately 28 years by galactic standard. A single duffel bag over her shoulder when she walked down the ramp. Kale descended to meet her because protocol demanded it. Up close she was unremarkable by most species standards, medium height, dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, warm brown skin dusted with the kind of scars that told stories. She looked at the blasted landscape of Kareth 7, a planet that had been killing colonists for 3 seasons, a planet that had no accessible surface water, where temperatures at midday reached 61 degrees Celsius, where the dust carried microscopic silica shards that shredded lung tissue, and she squinted once into the distance. Then she pulled out a battered notebook. "You're the human engineer," Kale said. It was not a question. "Maya," she said, not looking up from what she was writing. "And you must be Commander Kale. Your colony's water reclamation failure rate is at 93%, your dust filtration is inadequate for native particulates, and your shelter structures are oriented wrong for the thermal wind patterns." She looked up then. Her eyes were dark and very calm. "I read your reports on the flight over. Took about an hour." Kale's secondary eyes blinked. "Our engineering team has been working on these problems for 11 months, she said. "I know. Walk me to the water extraction units." The Vreth colonists watched the human move through their settlement like something between a ghost and a storm. She asked for nothing except access and silence. She crawled into the guts of machines that had been deemed irreparable. She climbed the colony's tallest calm tower at dusk without a safety harness. "The harness doesn't fit my hips anyway," and stood at the top for 40 minutes doing nothing but watching the way the thermal currents moved the dust across the basin below. Ven cornered Kale on the 3rd day. "She is maddening," Ven said. "She does not explain what she is doing. She eats ration packs cold. Last night I found her sleeping on the floor of the water processing bay with her boots still on." "Yes," Kale said. "Is she functional? Mentally?" Kale thought about the night before, when he had found Maya sitting in the dark beside the dormant primary condenser, not asleep, just thinking. She had not startled when he sat beside her. She had said, quietly, "On Earth there's a place called the Atacama Desert. Driest place on the planet. Basically no rain for decades at a stretch. Know what the people there figured out? Fog nets. They strung up mesh nets in the mountain passes and pulled water right out of the air. Liters a day." She'd paused. "Kareth 7 doesn't have fog. But it has something better." She hadn't said what. She'd just gone back to thinking. "She is perfectly functional," Kale told Ven. "She is planning." On day 9, Maya called a colony-wide meeting. The assembled Vreth, all 240 of them, regarded her with varying degrees of suspicion, exhaustion, and bare-bones hope. She stood at the front with a hand-drawn diagram taped to the wall behind her. It was covered in equations and cross-sections and what appeared to be, in one corner, a small doodle of a fish. "Kareth 7 doesn't have surface water," she began. But it has three things that most of your engineering models didn't account for as a system: deep subsurface brine aquifers at 400 meters down, a diurnal temperature swing of 50 degrees that produces significant condensation on the underside of your rock formations at dawn, and a prevailing thermal wind from the western ridge that runs at roughly 12 kilometers per hour for 8 hours a day. She tapped the diagram. Separately, useless. Together, they're a water supply. Silence. The aquifer brine is too saline to drink, said one of the senior engineers, a Vreth named Doss who had been on Kareth 7 since the beginning. His voice carried the particular flatness of a person who has been disappointed many times. We assessed it in month 2. Desalination requires energy we don't have. Passive solar desalination, Maya said. She pointed to a section of the diagram. You build shallow black-surfaced evaporation basins. I've already calculated the surface area you need. It's about 3 hectares. The briny water feeds in from the aquifer pump, sits in the basins, solar heat evaporates it, the vapor rises and hits a condensing surface above, and clean water runs down into collection channels. No external energy cost beyond the initial pump. Your sun here puts out enough radiation at midday to run the process. I've done the math 4 times. It works. And the condensation from the rock formations? Kale asked from the back. Maya allowed herself a small smile. That's the elegant part. You string collection mesh. I'm going to fabricate it from your existing polymer reserves. Shouldn't take more than 4 days, along the north face of the ridge where the condensation is heaviest at dawn. Run collection channels down to a cistern. I'm estimating 40 to 60 liters per meter of mesh per day at current humidity readings. And the thermal wind, she pointed to the third element, you use that for ventilation redesign in your shelters, which solves your heat problem and incidentally moves your dust contamination rate from lethal to manageable with some basic pre-filter baffles. The meeting room was very quiet. Doss, who had been on Kareth 7 for 11 months and had watched friends die of dehydration-related illness, said nothing for a long moment. Then, you calculated all of this in 9 days. 8.5, Maya said. Day 1 I was mostly sleeping off transit lag. They built it in 32 days. Maya worked beside them every hour of it, not directing from a distance but in the trenches, literally, when the aquifer bore drilling hit an unexpected rock stratum and needed someone small enough to descend into the shaft and manually redirect the drill head. She came back up covered in brine and ochre dust, spat, wiped her face, and said, "Okay, we're through, start the pump." On day 32, clean water ran into the colony cistern for the first time. Kale stood at the edge of the collection basin and watched it. The water was clear. Not recycled, not reclaimed, not rationed, new water, drawn from the dead bones of this planet by mesh and sunlight and the slow mathematics of a human mind that had grown up on a world that wanted to kill it, and had learned instead to see possibility inside hostility. Maya stood beside him. She was looking at the water too, but her notebook was already open, and she was writing something. "What are you designing now?" he asked. "Shade structures," she said. "If we angle them right over the evaporation basins, we can slow midday evaporation loss by about 30% and use the trapped heat for a secondary greenhouse. You could be growing food within 2 seasons." Kale looked at her. At the scars on her hands. At the exhaustion she wore like clothing she'd forgotten was there. At the small focused certainty in her expression that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with a species that had simply never learned to accept that a problem was permanent. "Why?" he asked. It was a genuine question. "You solved the crisis. You have fulfilled your contract. Why continue?" Maya glanced at him sidelong. A corner of her mouth moved. "Because your people are still thirsty," she said simply. "And I can still think." She went back to writing. Above them, the condensation mesh sang quietly in the thermal wind, and water, clean, impossible, human-made water, ran down the rock face of Kareth 7 like it had always belonged there. In the final report filed to the Vreth Colonial Council, Commander Kale wrote only this: "Do not send us more engineers. Send us more humans. And do not mistake their silence for confusion, they are planning. They are always planning."